I'd like to comment on what the Premier said during question time today. I asked the Premier today whether the government's new advertising campaign relating to the Technical College at Findon High School, I asked him how much that was costing and whether or not that was money that was taken from the education budget or whether that was indeed new money to the state budget. This is an important question, sir. The Premier did not have an answer to the first question. He did not know how much the Labor Party in government was spending on these new TV ads for Labor's election education policy. He said in relation to the second question, where was the money coming from, that it's coming from the state budget. It's a non-answer, sir, if ever there was one. But it is clear to me that if the money did not come from the Premier's own budget, then it is most likely to have come from within the Education Department's budget. That is money that could have been going to support preschools or indeed early childhood services or indeed schools across South Australia in any range of circumstances, but instead has been highlighted by the Labor Party as a spend that needed to happen on TV ads to encourage enrolment at Findon High School. Now, we've said before that enhancing the built form of Findon High School with their new technical college, there's no real problem with enhancing the built form at Findon High School. It's a school that will benefit from it. We have some serious questions about the model that Labor is operating for their technical colleges, whether the schools or indeed the department are getting bang for buck. But even that, sir, I will grant it was part of Labor's election commitment and they must deliver it, they should deliver it, and I certainly hope they will deliver it. People at Findon High School are expecting no less. The Premier in his answers said that it was a unique opportunity for students to be guaranteed a job when they leave school. That was just wrong, sir. We had 1,000 school-based apprentices engaged during the time of the previous government, each one of which was already in a job by the time they left school. Many of them, of course, further along in their apprenticeship than indeed will be offered to the students who are studying at Findon High School who have been promised the possibility to enter an apprenticeship after leaving school. But put that aside for 1 minute. I just want to really make the point that when the Labor Party and its members talk about whether it's the advertising campaign for enrolments at Findon High School, whether it's the other Labor government election policies, the administration of the new technical colleges, whether it's the autism inclusion teachers, or whether it's the expansion of what we had put in place of 55 new staff in mental health and wellbeing to 100, which will eventually be Labor's policy. That is not new money that's been introduced to the education budget. That is money, sir, that has been activated by the signature I put on a piece of paper in 2019 with the Commonwealth, activating the National School Funding Resourcing Agreement, better known as the Gonski Agreement. It was, in fact, the Liberal government in 2019 that activated that funding, and everything that the Labor Party has done in education has been paid for by that agreement. That required substantial new funding to be introduced to the South Australian Public Schools budget by the former Liberal government. $700 million of extra funding that we put into the Department for Education's budget over the coming 10 years that had not been left to us by the previous Wetherell government. And it's really worth noting that, sir, because without that extra funding that was enabled by the former Liberal government signing up to the national school funding reforms, this Labor government would not be able to deliver on any of those promises. And when we were in government and they were in opposition, they were very critical of the nature of the agreement that we signed with the federal government. They said, and indeed the Australian Education Union also said, that there was too much money being allocated out of that agreement to support things like the SACE Board and the Education Standards Board, and indeed certain items that were identified in the agreement that were up to 4% of the schooling resourcing standard that was allowed to be spent on other things that were necessary to deliver education in South Australia. I make the point that when you're investing $1.5 billion in new capital in the system, as we did over the 4 years, while the capital itself wasn't counted at all in the Gonski Agreement, and that was additional spend over and above what was required by that agreement, it is a cost to the system that should be recognised that you are managing those assets, and up to 4% was put in that category. To this point, the Malinowskis Labor government appears to have made no steps to recast that agreement, despite all of their rhetoric before the election. So until then, and until they get extra money from the federal government, if they ever do, and until they invest 1 extra cent in public schools over and above the resources that were left as a result of the agreement that we signed in 2019, I'll be less impressed in their generosity than those Labor members who have talked about these programs over the last couple of days as if they were new investments. They're not new investments. They're Labor choosing to do certain things with education money that would have otherwise gone to, other programs within education, and particularly schools. I make no complaint about them delivering on their election promises. They have a responsibility to do that. I do have a complaint if they are using money that should be going to support schools to instead produce television advertisements spruiking the Labor Party's election ads. I think that's a concern. I think Labor members should be concerned. I suspect many of them don't know about this, and it's time, hopefully very soon, for the Premier or the Education Minister to admit how much money the Labor Party has spent on these new ads, and indeed confirm whether or not it's been taken away from the schools budget, or if indeed it has been new money granted by the Premier's largesse from his department.